Our guest this morning is Kyle Barger. Some of you may know him from his work at the seminary, um, but he is also the AV guru at Temple Lutheran Church in Havertown. So, what I'm going to do, I started out, I recorded an interview with Kyle last week, and we're going to share that. So I'll ask you while we're playing the video to mute yourselves, and then when we're done, we'll have open forum for Q&A.
In the before times, we had two services, one of which was praise band and one of which was organ. And at this point, we're doing one service online each Sunday, and it has a combination of music.
How are you delivering most of this to your people?
The Sunday morning service goes out by YouTube. And basically, I run it from my laptop at home. My wife, Flory Marks, is with me usually. She's the music director at the church. We usually play the part of the congregation and read the congregational responses to the liturgy. And our pastor, Tim Johansson, is remote. At this point, usually from the sanctuary. So he actually stands in the pulpit to give the sermon and so forth, but that he is the only person in the sanctuary and joins us remotely. And that's all streamed out on YouTube. And I use a software package called Vmix to do the YouTube streaming and bring in all of our audiovisual content. So the sermon and generally most of the liturgy is live. The music and scripture readings, prayer readings, and so forth are pre-recorded.
And your pastor, who's coming from church, what is his technology set up there?
He basically is using a laptop with a webcam. One of the features of Vmix is that for the paid version, at least, is that you can have somebody basically do a remote in. So he has a web address that he goes to, and he's just on the webcam and microphone on his laptop. And we did find that we didn't find this, we knew it already, that the Wi-Fi in our sanctuary is somewhat flaky. It's fine if you're looking at Facebook or checking your email or something. If you're going to do a video stream, it's not the best. So we have a maybe, I don't know, 100-foot Ethernet cable snaked in across the hallway from the church office, which is where the router is. And that improved the connection a lot, having it on the Ethernet rather than the Wi-Fi.
Okay. You mentioned the paid version of Vmix. Yeah. I know there are several levels. What level did you go to?
We went with the HD Pro version, I think it is, which was a flat $350. The reason we picked it was some of the audience may know that in my day job, I work at United Lutheran Seminary. And the reason we picked Vmix was simply that I was familiar with it from using it for YouTube events at the seminary. And they offer a fairly generous trial period. It's either 60 days or 90 days. This is the Vmix control panel, and there's a lot of things you can do with it, which is good. It also means it can be confusing, and basically you can bring in different pieces of media. So this image right here, this is a still image. It's a JPEG file. This over here in this window is a PowerPoint file. So this is the main PowerPoint for our service, and that's kind of pre-existing thing because we were already using the PowerPoints in our sanctuary for worship before we went online. So this window over here is basically what's going out. And this window over here is sort of the next thing that's up, and the preview, and everything that's here is your media that you've got lined up if you have music, you can play the music. So you can combine the the music and whatever video content you have. So if you have PowerPoint slides, if you have image files, if you have videos, you can just put them here, and basically you just cut in whatever content you have in whatever order. And what I try to do is I try to just put in every piece of content that I have for a particular Sunday and put it in order, so I can just click from one thing to the next. You can do fancier things. You can have titles at the bottom, if you want to reflect who's speaking or something like that. But it works pretty well. It streams with YouTube or with, let me see, what are our options here? YouTube or Facebook Live. And there are several other options, as you can see. What I always tell people is there is no best way. There's the way you're going to do it that works for you and works for your congregation. And again, I don't want to say that one way is better or worse. I've seen a lot of online services, and people are doing some great things with it. So, this is working for us.
How much horsepower do you have on your laptop?
I'm using an Asus ZenBook. I would say that it's I'd say it's a middle of the road business laptop. It's not super high end. It's also not the cheapest thing out there. We had trouble at the beginning getting everything to work properly. Basically, we didn't have enough horsepower on the computer for what we were trying to do. And first of all, that was a different computer, it was an older laptop. But the other problem was, the real root of the problem was that we were running the stream, we were running the input, we were running the remote camera for the pastor. And so the computer's basically running 3 video streams at the same time. And it got to be too much for it. And we solved that problem by basically cutting back down the resolution. You can choose what resolution and what bitrate you stream at. And so we cut it down. So if you've watched our services, you may notice that when we go from one slide to another, that the transition is kind of fuzzy. And that's because we're broadcasting at 480p and a fairly low bit rate on the video, because 90% of our video is PowerPoint slides and talking heads. And so the value add for going to a full Blu-ray quality HD stream is just not there for us. We do use a higher bit rate for the audio to make sure that the music sounds good. So I guess my advice would be, try to use what you have and experiment. And when I say experiment, I mean experiment behind closed doors. Don't experiment during your worship service when you're live to the internet. Most of the technical problems we had at the beginning were 100% traceable to the fact that we didn't test everything. I guess the only thing I could say is whatever you're doing, if it works for your congregation, great, and keep at it. This is all new for everybody, or at least for most of us. If you can find one thing to change to make it better, change that one thing, and don't try to overhaul everything in 1 week. Continual, gradual improvement, and keep up the good work.
So thank you, Kyle, for your time. It took a lot longer than 8 minutes to do that interview, so I appreciate your...
That's always the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So now Kyle is here. We gave you a really fast primer behind the scenes on how they are doing their particular setup using a computer video mixer. So now, what are your questions?
Well, I see we have one in the chat. How do you collect the scripture readers and musicians ahead of the service? Who edits the content and on what software? The scripture readings, the prayers, and the children's sermon from our youth minister. Basically, they just record them and send them to me, and I don't really do any editing on those. It's kind of what they send in is what goes out, and generally that works pretty well. I mean, most of the time, if somebody records a video themselves, reading, or if they just do audio only, if they do it, that's fine. We've had a couple times when people had scheduling challenges or technical challenges, and we ended up just doing a Zoom call, and I recorded them. Our parish administrator takes care of sort of shuffling the volunteer list for the readings and prayers, and contacts each person to get them each week to let them know it's their turn, and we go from there. The biggest problem with that is the scheduling. Like I said, I don't do any editing, so as long as I have it by Saturday evening, I'm fine. But once it gets to Saturday morning and I haven't heard from the person, I don't know if they've forgotten about it or if they're just running late. So there's that. The music is kind of a different animal. We kind of weren't really planning this at the beginning, but we had a couple singers who we talked to and were willing to come into the sanctuary and record the vocal music, and that kind of turned into a music bubble. We record the music. Most of the music we record in the sanctuary. We do some pieces where it's remotely. One week we had one of our singers was quarantining because she had possibly been exposed to somebody. So in that case, we recorded the keyboard and the second singer, and then we sent that to the one who was quarantined to record her track on top of that. So that's it. And I do that, all the audio editing, which has kind of been my personal adventure for the last year, learning how to do that. And I use audio software called Reaper, which is works pretty well. They all have their own quirks. Let's see. I think I've mostly answered that question.
Kyle,
Yeah.
there's a question in the chat which is sort of related to this one. Someone is suggesting in chat about using a video camera as opposed to any other kind of device.
Yeah.
But tying that in, I noticed the pastor's background changed from time to time, and you indicated that he was using a laptop with a web-based camera. Does that mean he moves the camera from time to time, or does he stay in one place?
That's right. He literally picks up the laptop and moves it while during the hymns and so forth when he's off camera. So he has some strategically placed music stands around the sanctuary to get him at the altar and get him at the pulpit and so forth. And regarding using a camcorder instead of a laptop camera, yeah, generally that would be better. You don't necessarily need a super high quality camera. You do need to get it into the computer as a USB input, and they make US HDMI to USB converters that are in like the $100 to $300 range. The big thing I feel like it gives you more. Gives you the possibility to have a zoom lens, which is I think is very handy, especially if you have a stationary camera and you can't move it around. How does Vmix compare to OBS? I have not used OBS. I think OBS is definitely worth exploring if you're interested in doing something like this. My take on it is the feature set is very similar. OBS is free software. And so a lot of people have written add-ons and to that. So if you're interested in that, I'd check it out. You know, and like I said, try Vmix, try OBS, see what you like, see if you know, for your purposes, there may not be a compelling reason to use Vmix, and OBS may be good. There are a lot of people using OBS. OBS, by the way, is open broadcasting system or open broadcasting software or something like that, for those who haven't heard of it.
Has anybody here experimented at all with OBS?
I have, but I haven't gotten very far.
Yeah, I hear that. All these softwares are pretty intuitive once you learn them, but they all have their own quirks in how you set them up. I have played around with OBS, and the one thing you have to really remember is that each scene that you set up has its own audio. So if you have audio you want to continue, you've got to make sure you set it up. I don't know if Vmix has a similar.
Yeah, Vmix has a similar thing. The default in Vmix is that the audio kind of plays when you queue it up in the window. And so if you have, if you want the audio to play when something else is in the window, like if you want the audio to play on top of a PowerPoint or on top of an image, you can do that. But you have to tell it, basically you have to tell it, no, don't do the automatic mixing. Let me, you know, turn it on and off when it's time. And the same thing, you know, for, you know, if you're switching in the video, if you have the video camera feed, but you want to have a different audio, you can do that. So it can get, it can get trickier first. It took me a few weeks to get used to, you know, what I needed to switch where. Let's see. Storage housekeeping. I am the last person to ask for advice about housekeeping, virtual or otherwise. But I can tell you how I do it is I basically have a folder for each Sunday, and it's stored on OneDrive on my computer, which means that it all gets backed up. So if you know, I leave the computer on top of my car and it gets smashed on the highway, all that stuff is still there. So I basically keep a folder for each Sunday with all of the audio recordings, all the videos that people submit, the PowerPoints as they come in. And then I kind of have a folder for the current Sundays that I'm working on and that are coming up, and then another folder for all the old Sundays that have passed and that we aren't working on anymore. So I'm not sure, you know, I just try something that works with you. And you know, I kind of changed what I was doing as we went along, as I learned that some things would be more helpful. For example, when we go in to record the music, we usually, for any given piece, we usually do 2 or 3 takes. And at the beginning, we would pick which take we were going to use, and I would, you know, set it up, finish up whatever editing we needed to do and export it. I did not actually mark which of the 3 takes we used. So, you know, 6 months later, if we went back and said, hey, why don't we use this song again that we did back in May? And I went back, it was like, oh boy, which one of these did I do? So I started changing the name of the folder to say that, okay, this take was the final one that we actually used, and so forth. So some things like that, mark, you know, mark what you're doing. You know, it's not, you know, I think the most important thing is to find a system that works for you. We do use a standard slide at the end of the service that has all of our licensing information for the services we've subscribed to, and then each the title card for each song also has the license and copyright information for that particular song.
Carl,
And I will tell you, it's rare that a week goes by without getting copyright flag from YouTube, including for public domain hymns. We got a copyright notice for "O Sacred Head Now Wounded," which is definitely public domain. But it always comes up and says that the penalty is that you can't monetize it. You can't sell ads on it. We weren't trying to sell ads on our church services anyway, so that's fine. And it's so far, we haven't gotten anything that actually counted as a copyright strike against us. So, we've been moving along with that. That seems to kind of be the way things are on YouTube at this point.
Kyle, I have a question. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
We tried to get into like a live stream through our through Facebook. We have a Canon camera. We took a USB, connected it directly to the computer, but apparently the computer says that there was something that was not reading the camera. Is there a program that we need to look at, or is there like a box or something that you have to convert something else to get the computer to read it?
Camlink will do that.
Yeah.
Camlink?
Camlink.
And that's a program you download?
No, it's a little device.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's
it's go ahead.
I was going to say what model Canon camera?
I don't know off the top of my head.
There is,
like I said, it does have the USB, the smaller USB connection to it. But I don't know if that generally makes it compatible for a computer or not, just because it's there.
That depends.
Software from Canon, I think they call it actually webcam software that you can download, which probably is the driver or maybe the driver that you need to connect that.
And what was that called again? I'm sorry, Bob?
I believe it's just Canon webcam software.
Okay.
It depends on the camera. A lot of times that USB cable is just to let you copy files off of the camera straight onto the computer.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't necessarily enable it as a live camera feed. So you need some other piece of software or one of the boxes that convert the HDMI feed into a USB.
And the Camlink would do that.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, as long as you have an HDMI output.
Yeah. I mean, we tried the recording thing, but we're a small church, and it tends to take a lot of people and a lot of effort to make that happen. So
it's definitely a rabbit hole.
Yes. It takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination.
Yeah, and you can go really crazy trying to get the best of everything. So I like what Kyle said on the video of, what's the one next thing you can do that might make it a little better, and take it piece by piece. I know there are some churches here that have put in systems or have gotten cameras installed. I know there are some folks who are, for the most part, using a camera to do the whole service. Kyle, what's your thought about why it's important to be able to have these different media and shots to switch between?
Well, in terms of different, if you're thinking about doing it from your sanctuary in terms of different camera angles, it just gives you more flexibility. It lets you cut away from something that's not happening. I mean, like I said, our pastor uses the hymns as an opportunity to move his location from, the pulpit to the altar or whatever. If you have, cameras, you can make that, switch more fluidly. Like I said, that takes more people. It's a thing to try to recruit people to do that. My late father was one of the people who ran the soundboard at his church pre-pandemic in North Carolina, and I heard one pastor, it may have been in this group last year, say that they kind of had a group of older folks that were running their soundboard, and as they retired and moved away, they were having trouble getting younger volunteers to do it. And that just you know, you throw a camera into the mix, and that's you know, it improves the output, but it's you know, it's more it gets more complicated on the back end. And the big thing about having I feel about having a camera like a camcorder or something like that, as compared to a webcam, is you get the zoom lens. So you can change your camera angle without changing the camera. You can, you know, give a tight shot on the pastor when they're in the pulpit preaching. If they're at the altar, you can pull back and show more of the whole scene. So, you know, I feel like that's kind of one of the biggest advantages of doing that. The video quality of webcams these days is usually pretty good. So the zoom lens is one of the big things you get going for the camcorder, and you don't need a big fancy camcorder to do something like this. A lot of the low end ones have really good video quality, and a lot of the extra features, you know, are things that you may not use if all you're going to do is point it and do a live stream. So it's you know, it's not always easy to tell what's good for one particular situation.
Yeah, and there are just so many options. In fact, I want to show you a couple here. You should be able to see here the website for this OBS Studio software, which is completely free, and it's on every platform, Mac, Windows, even Linux. And its interface looks relatively similar, not quite as polished as Vmix, but it's there and the functions are the same. There's also a service, there are several services. StreamYard is one, Streamlabs Melon is another. There are systems that do essentially this on the web, which allows you to, you know, create a broadcast, and you can bring guests in, you can put banners and branding material over your picture. Oh, there we are. See, my name even showed up there. You get their regular StreamYard logo unless you pay, but there is a free tier of this. There's also hardware. This is a real simple switcher. It's by Blackmagic Design, who do high-end video stuff. This is their entry-level piece. It's called an ATEM Mini, and it is will take audio inputs, HDMI inputs, and send it out by USB to your computer, where it will be encoded for streaming, and it's $300 new. I've seen them used for $200. There are higher level models of this. You can spend $600 or $1,000 on different models that give you more features, but the basic one, you know, it's got your 4 buttons to push between, and you can have your even the videos on a computer played through there. Or another good way to use something like this is to take some of the load off of your computer, so that you can have 4 different cameras, and as you switch behind it, your computer only has to process the one at a time, which, as Kyle was saying, too much processing will slow your computer down. And there's also software to use your use your phone as a camera. You know, we all have these really great little cameras that we're carrying around, and you can connect them wirelessly to your computer and use them as additions. So it's part of the hard part of this. There's an awful lot that we can do. So I see another question here for Kyle. As we move forward, what investment might you suggest to continue the live stream, keeping in mind the changes and challenges the internet and social media will face? And I'm also assuming, John, you didn't say this in the question, but that's going forward and to do it as hybrid with people in person and also streaming.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not there yet personally. My congregation is not yet there. We've started to talk about it. I don't know that I have a single good suggestion. It's kind of in a way, it's a completely different thing to do it hybrid than to do it online. It's not, I mean, when we first started, we kind of had somebody or some congregation had somebody with a phone streaming to Facebook Live, and that's a great place to start. It gets more complicated when you're trying to do both at once. I think one of the big questions is, can we preserve the level of interaction we have between people in the sanctuary and the people who are viewing online? That's tough. I'm not sure how we get there. And then there are just some kind of nuts and bolts challenges. Right now, as I said, our pastor is the only person in the sanctuary during the service. Nobody cares where the camera is. Nobody cares how many cables we have laying on the floor. You bring the congregation back into the sanctuary, it becomes more problematic to have the camera sitting up in front of the pastor's face while they're in the pulpit preaching, so then you get into, well, then we need a camera that can be farther back in the sanctuary, and it needs to be higher up, and which may be a problem if you don't have a balcony in your sanctuary, and so on and so forth. And so I don't have a good answer for that. I think back a year ago, a lot of people kind of probably were trying a lot of stuff to see what would work. And I think we're going to go through that phase again as we move back toward having more in-person services.
Yeah, John, I think the real important part of your question is the word investment, because I do think that as we go forward, for many of our churches, the online version of the service, if it's not a separate service, the online presence is an important service of the church. So we need to think about how we don't have to go crazy, but basic service, a decent computer, perhaps a camera, perhaps software or hardware. It can be done fairly inexpensively, but probably looking at making sure that there's some budget for this as we go forward is a great idea.
Well, historically, I can identify with Kyle's father because I was one of those audio guys when I was a youngster working in churches too. And churches made a big investment years ago for the audio portion of things. And now today it's the virtual side that is taking the forefront. And fortunately, we live in a time where the price point on this kind of equipment has come down considerably. And I'm glad you brought up the Black Magic design because I looked at their YouTube videos and that's a phenomenal product. However, you go back to it again, a volunteer who understands what that switcher is capable of doing and using it to its fullest potential. And then we're going to get more people like Kyle's father back in that audio video booth to put that broadcast together without all the cables running across your sanctuary. So it's an interesting time, challenging time, and changing time, and I think we'll do just fine in a matter of months or a year. So.
Yeah, and as our churches are not being used for worship for a bit more, anyway, hopefully not too much longer, that is a time to maybe think of how to route cables and how to mount cameras perhaps, or how to put cameras on tripods in places that will be effective. The other thing that's real important is to make sure, and I think a lot of us have already done this, but make sure that you figured out how to bring your audio system, whatever it is, into the video feed. Because audio is way more important, as Kyle said in the interview. And having good quality audio is really important, because people will not, you can have great video, but if the audio is terrible, people are probably not going to hang around. Now, fortunately, we often have a captive audience, people who want to see us, but we still need to pay attention to that, especially thinking about, the cleaner the audio, the easier it is for folks who have hearing difficulties to be able to hear it clearly. So, are there any other questions folks have for Kyle? Nathan?
Well, not sorry, not for Kyle, but the audio portion as well, I guess. So what we're using right now is the OBS software, and we've got we have 3 Mevo Start cameras, and they're small web cameras, but they communicate with the laptop through, it's called an NDI. I don't know what NDI stands for, but basically it's all wireless. And so we're able to switch between 3 different cameras, and we're going to add in a 4th. I'm somewhat nervous about how the 4th will be accepted by, the rest of the thing. We had some lag issues early on, but we fixed it, had to change the bit rate and, all all that sort of thing. And we also had to upgrade the internet at the church because the internet was 75/75, and that just wasn't enough to handle the video as well as all the different phones that automatically connect to it at any particular time, and the office computer and my computer and all these other computers. Anyways, so what I plan on doing when we do reopen is continue with the virtual worship, but I found long camera, not really tripods, just stands, but one long stick basically that the camera can sit on top of, and it won't obstruct views. But I basically plan on using the camera as another audience member, another congregation member. As I'm addressing the congregation, I'll also address the congregation in the camera. So I'll just use that as another eye that I'm looking at. And basically have a regular service that way. So that's kind of our plan and our setup. But that's why I use OBS and the NDI connection.
Yeah, great. Thanks for mentioning that. The NDI connections, and I don't know what it stands for either, but it has something to do with network. But it can work wireless or wired depending on your devices. And running Ethernet cables is a lot easier than running power cables and video cables and audio cables to one spot. So that's another option to look into. There are even some of the programs that allow you to use your phone that will turn it into an NDI camera.
Yeah, there's OBS has it's an open broadcast software thing. So there's all sorts of add-ons, and one of them was an NDI connection for the phone. So I also have my iPhone that I can put up if I want to, but like I said, we just purchased another camera to add instead.
I noticed last week, Bob, when you talked about the cameras that can be mounted in the balconies and the remote control and so forth, many of them are NDI as well, which I did look up, Network Digital Interface. And just not a plug for the company, but the company that developed that interface is NewTek. And NewTek is big in school districts because they put out the video system in a box. I forgot exactly what the name of it is. A webcaster or something like that. TriCaster, which is a great product. Very expensive for churches, however. But apparently that NDI piece of software is critical to a lot of other components in the marketplace.
One of our contractors several years ago now convinced us to go see a demo of the TriCaster, and it was very impressive.
Very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's also I think the entry level unit was $10,000 or something like that. So it's aimed more at the commercial broadcast market.
I know our district in Souderton at the high school has a TriCaster, and I've looked at it. It's a very nice piece of equipment, but expensive.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I think the entry level might be a little bit lower than that, but it's still pretty pricey. I do know that Kyle mentioned that you don't have to have the world's fastest computer to be able to do Vmix. On the other hand, you can't go get the cheap one off the shelf at Best Buy and expect that to to really work. And if you look at Vmix's website, they recommend different builds that would of computers that might make more sense if you're actually running multiple cameras in a church building, and they can get pretty pricey too by the time you add in the video cards and memory that you need for that. So there, it's all trade-offs, but there are lots of ways to do this and to be able to, what I liked in looking at some of the video that we borrowed from Temple is the different shots that the pastor could get just simply moving the computer around, which made it interesting because he'd come back and he'd be in a slightly different place, and we're kind of used to that from watching videos these days. Kyle, I was curious, the music that was recorded in the sanctuary, but at a different time.
Correct. We do all the music pre-recorded.
Okay, great. Well,
We have one more question in the chat. Audio for outside. I don't have a question. I don't have an answer for that. I don't have any particular experience with that. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to chime in with.
I know of a couple of churches. One was really brilliant. Because they had to keep putting up and taking down their audio system for their band, that they put it in a rack that was on wheels, so they could actually then move it not outdoors, but right inside where they were going to be, and run cables outside for speakers and for microphones. There are portable PA systems. Fender makes a couple of them. They're called Passport systems, and they're not real cheap, but they do give you a whole bunch of inputs in a place where you could take an output from that and connect that into your. I don't know how you do it with a phone. If you're doing it with a Mevo, I know there's the ability to make those connections.
In Lynn's case, Bob, I'm familiar with the Passport system because I helped the Indian Valley Library make a decision for buying that piece of equipment for them, as we were friendly with the librarian at the time. I don't know whether it works on a wireless base. You could probably get a wireless receiver and plug that into the input of the Passport, and then put the pastor on a wireless mic, and you have a whole system contained in a box. That would be a good suggestion.
I believe some of the Passport systems have Bluetooth connection as an option.
And maybe
So that may
come
be
a long
helpful.
way. Yeah, I'm sure it'll work.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about investment in this, because it certainly is an issue. The good news is a lot of this stuff has, a fairly long life if you buy it looking ahead. If you're buying a camera and it has 4K, then you're probably good for quite a while. As long as you have HD, actually, you should be good for a while. And so when we need to replace these things in 5, 7, 10 years, better stuff will be really cheap because the prices just keep going down. Lynn, does that help you at all? You're still on mute. Well, okay, we can, Lynn, keep playing with that, and when you get back on, oh, there you
I'm
are.
sorry. I I keep touching something on my laptop. I don't know what it is, and suddenly everything's
Spacebar.
blank. Sometimes I can come back, and other times I get fouled up. So we do have a new camera now. It's not a Mevo. I learned that you need to have an Apple computer to use a Mevo, and we don't have the Apple. So
No.
we're using something else. That's not true?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. No.
Oh, interesting. We have
It-
something
it-
else. That was
It
cheap.
may be if I'm not familiar with the Mevo. It may be that it has like a USB or something that would be proprietary, but the NDI network hookup would be good for any computer that supports it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think they actually have software to use that Mevo Start as a webcam. And I think it actually came out on Windows before it came out on Mac. Hard to keep track of, of all these things.
Anyway, thank you for the response. So we are not using a phone now, we're using a camera. So I don't know, maybe it'll all work out just fine, but I was chastised the other day because apparently we don't know what we're doing with anything as a tech team. Not that I do anything, but anyway, that's a whole other story that I won't get into.
And it certainly is possible to connect a soundboard or output of a PA to Mevo. John Ware, you've worked on that, right?
Yes, Gunter worked on it. He has the switching device and we're tied into the soundboard. I don't know the specifics of it, but generally, yes.
That was not a terribly expensive operation, was it?
No, for some reason, I'm thinking it was around $300 to make the connection. I could be off on that, but I think that's what it was.
Okay, excellent. Well, Kyle, thank you for your time and expertise.
You're welcome.
Sharing with us. And as we've all seen, there's just a ton of things that we can use and different ways we can try to make our online presence better. And I appreciate all of you actually sharing your experience. If you have questions as they come up or you start thinking about it, I'll certainly be glad to talk to you. But I know there are people in this group who could also help with very specific because they've used things already.